Thanks everybody for coming. I'm Jeff O'Hanley from Otsego County Conservation Association. Looks like everybody, just about everybody, is muted, which is great. We should have a great program today. I will turn this over to Wendy and just remind folks that you can ask questions using the chat bar at any time. I do believe we'll be holding questions toward the end of each presentation as we go. Wendy, do you want to get us started?
Sure, thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. This is Wendy Walsh. I'm the Watershed Coordinator for the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. I just wanted to welcome you to our third session of the 2020 Upper Susquehanna Watershed Virtual Forum. As you know, current circumstances do not allow us to meet in large numbers or in person, so in place of our annual Watershed Forum this year, we've decided to hold a series of mini sessions focused on conservation efforts within the watershed. These sessions have been put together by the USC Education and Outreach Committee, along with the Otsego County Conservation Association. All sessions are recorded and can be viewed from the USC website. If you have ideas for future sessions, please let us know. We're looking for more topics. Today's focus highlights a project of the USC Wetland Team and our partners. The Wetland Team continues to be actively planning, designing, implementing, and monitoring wetlands in the watershed. One project is our Hellbender work, which is the focus of today's mini session. The USC Wetland Team and TWT partners are here today to present on the Hellbender stream habitat restoration work that we've been doing. So I will turn it over to them. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy.
Hi, good morning. This is Jeremy Waddell. I'm the wetlands biologist for Upper Susquehanna Coalition, and we've been really fortunate over the last few years to be involved with this Hellbender restoration project. The first thing I want to emphasize is the partnership approach, because conservation priorities like this are rarely achieved without a broad network of partners involved to assist with a multitude of components. So without the cooperation of Cumming College and SUNY ESF, the Bronx Zoo, the DEC, the USCA and Clean Water Institute, and the Wetland Trust, of course, this project would be difficult to accomplish. So just a brief background on the Hellbender, the geographic range. We are at the northern end of the Eastern Hellbender Range. Its populations are quite abundant in the southern portions of its range, and in New York State, the populations are rather stable in western New York. The Susquehanna Basin Hellbender populations are what some would characterize as at a critical level. Some of the historic threats to the Eastern Hellbender include overcollection and deliberate eradication, which is still unfortunately ongoing today, water pollution, waterborne diseases, and habitat loss. A major component of the conservation effort into the Hellbender is land acquisition and protection, habitat protection. So it's been a major focus of the Wetland Trust to acquire properties that are adjacent to or in the vicinity of known or previous or historic Hellbender habitat. And through funding through the Fish and Wildlife Service with the Richardson Hill landfill, the Wetland Trust was able to acquire 2 separate parcels of land that occupy the known Hellbender location. So this was a critical component in achieving the perpetual conservation and protection of the property. Here's a quick view, drone photo of the Reaches Stream, where we have been focusing the habitat restoration and some additional efforts to reestablish forest cover on the riparian zone is going to be ongoing through this area. We were able to source flagstone at a nearby quarry, and as part of the Richardson Hill funding, we were able to move the slab rock up to the property, and in cooperation with SUNY SF and Lycoming College and DEC and all the partners, we were able to identify areas where we were able to receive permits, Article 15 permits to install the slab rock for the Hellbenders for the prior to the release of the first cohort of Hellbenders. We rented a telescoping forklift, and some of the stones were small enough in size to be able to be managed by hand, but many of them had to be lowered into the stream. The project was fairly successful. Michelle had some of the released Hellbenders were occupying the habitat post-release, and so that was encouraging. We are going to be installing additional slab rock in 2020. I just received the permit yesterday from Region 4 DEC to move ahead with the installation. The stone has already been mobilized to the site, and so we're just going to be picking a window of low flow conditions when it's conducive and works for everybody, and we're going to install the second phase of the cover rocks at the upstream reach. And that parcel of land was previously under negotiation during 2018 when we did the first project. So we're excited about expanding the cover rock project, and we hope that there's going to be additional utilization of that habitat by this next cohort of released animals, which is at the Bronx Zoo now. And Michelle Herman, who's a biologist with Wetland Trust, has been spearheading the effort of rearing and the mark and recapturing, and so she has some more information about that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle.
All right, hi everybody. As Jeremy said, I'm Michelle Herman, and I'm a biologist with the Wetland Trust, and I've been mostly in charge of the captive rearing and field monitoring of the Hellbenders. So I'm just going to very briefly give an update on that. So as Jeremy already touched on, the basic components of this project are population augmentation, because there was a pretty severe crash starting in the mid-90s or late 90s, and we don't really know why. So we want to restore this population. And then there is a field monitoring component, and then there's also habitat enhancement, as Jeremy touched on, through installation of artificial habitat structures or huts, and then the slab rock. And to date, we have successfully reared and released 99 juveniles. They went out in August 2018, and I have been out in the field monitoring them ever since. So for the Head Start monitoring, we do this mainly through pit tags. We inject a pit tag into the base of the tail, and with a tag reader, it works much like a metal detector would. You just wave it over the rocks, and it'll give you an ID of an animal if it's under that rock. So we're able to monitor these guys with fairly little disturbance to them, which is nice. And pictured here is my floating workstation with all of my gear for monitoring these animals. So once they went out in 2018, we've been trying to get out as often as we can, and we do a full reach scan of the area where we release them, and just try to cover the entire stream bottom and record who is still there, because we want to know where they're going and whether they're utilizing this habitat that we put in for them. And we also try to capture the animals at least once a year. I give them a brief health assessment. I measure them, I weigh them, and I also swab them for chytrid fungus because that's a big concern with not just hellbenders, but amphibians in general. It's a widespread disease that infects their skin. And then the other side of the coin is that through all this habitat restoration and monitoring of these released juveniles, we're actually finding that there are some adults left at this site, which was really exciting. So there was this long period of time, starting about in the mid-90s to up to 2014, where there were sporadic rock lifting surveys, and only 3 adults were found during this period, which was very depressing. It was thought that maybe they were going to be extirpated from this area. But since we've installed these huts and started to check them since 2017, we now know of 11 adults at the site, 8 males, 3 females, which is really exciting. And they're utilizing our huts very often, which is really great to see. And then through these huts, we're also finding that there is still some reproduction occurring at the site. And with the nesting, it's a great opportunity because with these huts, we are able to collect a portion of the nests, and we can hand those over to our partners at the Bronx Zoo, which we have a cohort there now, about 130 animals. Or we can leave a portion of the nest to just naturally hatch in the wild, although while we know that the larvae successfully hatch in our huts, we have no idea what happens to them afterwards. So it's still a bit of a mystery as to why we don't have recruitment. But to date, we have had 6 nests and huts among, I believe, 4 males, which has exceeded our expectations, I would say, for a population that was believed to be extirpated. So just to wrap this up, in the future, we are, of course, looking to bring in the second wave of juveniles from the Bronx Zoo. The Wetland Trust has a state-of-the-art rearing facility where we're able to give them different water and diet treatments with these 6 recirculating tank systems. So we're hoping to get them in this fall, and they will go out next year in 2021. And we're also exploring different monitoring techniques. So in addition to the handheld pit tag scanner, we have some other means we're trying. We're trying to put these miniature tag reading devices in front of the huts themselves to monitor animals going in and out. And then we also have these massive cables that we stretch across the stream bottom, and they are able to read, if a tagged animal crawls across the bottom, they'll automatically record that, so we know if our animals are actually leaving the study area. And I'll also continue to monitor the huts for nesting activity. We'll possibly keep collecting more eggs, and ultimately we just want to know what the population size is, where these animals are coming from, why there's low recruitment. And with that, I suppose we will turn it over to questions, or if Wendy or anybody else would like to step in.
Thank you, Michelle and Jeremy. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. Melissa asks, how are the cover rocks used by the Hellbenders?
So we've had a few instances of juveniles utilizing the slab rocks. The slab rocks are essentially placed in between 2 historical reaches with natural habitat. So the only habitat where those placed rocks are is just those placed rocks. So it's more of a travel corridor right now. So we don't have really sustained long-term use, but we have had, I would say, about a half a dozen or more cases of our released juveniles utilizing these rocks as they move back and forth between the natural reaches, which is what we were hoping to achieve for now, since there was so little habitat there to begin with.
Okay. I asked, how big are the Hellbenders when they are released?
When they went out, they were, I will say, roughly 8 inches long, And right now they are more like roughly a foot long, I would say.
Jim has asked how much space between the rock and river bottom, and does high water ever dislodge the rocks?
Well, the hellbenders need very little space underneath these rocks. They're very soft and squishy, you could say. They can crawl under incredibly tight spaces, and they make like a very, very shallow cavity underneath the rock. So they don't need much space when we place these rocks. And so far, the rocks have been fairly stable. We had a pretty bad flood in fall 2018 that dislodged a few, but these are pretty massive rocks, so it would take a lot to significantly shift them.
Melissa also asks, why is there such a limited amount of habitat in the stream naturally?
Well, the butternut overall is it's a very agricultural stream. It's really kind of odd that there's rock there at all where we're working. It's very different from the vast majority of the system. So yeah, it's kind of just this small island of habitat where otherwise it's fairly slow and silty with not a lot of substrate for the hellbenders to utilize.
And I would just add to that one of the key components of the hellbender habitat is mature, dense riparian forest cover, and those are the areas that have the highest densities and have the right conditions. The hellbender itself being kind of a keystone species, an indicator species, if that of high water quality. So I think that speaks to the butternut in general. I think it's probably comparatively speaking to the rest of a lot of the water bodies of equivalent size, is probably one of our highest quality watersheds in the Susquehanna drainage. And so, but over time and through land use, sedimentation, siltation has ultimately led to the demise of the cover rocks, and the historic natural habitat has been lost through siltation.
And have you seen? Are there hellbender populations in some of the other tributaries in say Otsego County? I had heard a report a few years back. Somebody said they found some in Otsego Creek, and I wasn't actually sure if that was the case or not.
There was some eDNA work done several years ago, about 2014, that returned a few positive hits in some other streams. Those have yet to be confirmed, those other places, because there are no hellbenders actually cited at those locations, but there was a positive eDNA signal, which is not always 100% reliable, but it is possible. There are some stray individuals in other creeks and rivers, but the numbers are just so low, it would be very hard to detect them.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Wendy, should we turn it back to you?
Sure. I just want to thank everybody for participating today, and we appreciate your attendance. And I'll be sending out a link of the recording, so if you want to share that with others that were maybe unable to be on today's mini session, that would be great. And next week, our focus is going to be on the stream team and a project in Chemung County that will be presenting same time, 9:30 on July 29th. Thanks everybody for participating.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.